Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm here today to introduce 3 bills to make our government work a little better. But before I get to those, I want to put a question to all of us in this chamber, the thousands who are sitting here tonight in the gallery, folks watching, but most of us, those of us who have the privilege to have this job. Why are we here? What's the reason we decided to get into this line of work? There's a small number of us who, I don't know, may go on to be president or some other office. There's a handful of us who get our viral clips on the local news. There's some larger number of us who actually get their name on a big bill that makes a difference, and we're remembered by our names, the Tafts and Hartleys and Sarbanes and Oxleys. But the truth of us is that most of us are going to be about as well known to our successors as our predecessors are to us. We're here, we're doing a job. We will be known for the office that we held. We will be remembered for the dignity with which we held that office, but not for who we are as individuals. And that's okay, right? One of my favorite pieces of advice I got when getting this line of work was from President Obama, who said, "This is not a sprint, this is a relay, and your job is to pass the baton to the next person in a little bit of a better position than you had it when you picked it up on the last leg." Now, everybody in this body has different policy views, different ideas about what a better position in that relay might look like. But I'd submit that we do have some universal goals that we all agree on, or else we wouldn't be in this line of work. We all want a government that delivers the greatest good for the greatest number. We all want a government that upholds our founding promise of freedom and equality. We all, I think, believe Abraham Lincoln's admonition to us that a government of, by, and for the people should not perish from this earth. And we all also, I think, agree that on those really hard questions, the beauty of the government that our founders created is on the hard ones where we disagree, the single best way to resolve those disputes is through a democratic process. It ain't always the best way, but we decided not to have kings. We've agreed not to resolve those through wars. We've agreed to resolve them through a democratic process. And I agree with Winston Churchill when he said that democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the other ones that have been tried. But it is the best one that we've got. And I put those goals out there because I think they're universal. But if we're honest with ourselves, I'm not sure we're doing such a good job. When we have record wealth inequality, when we have record numbers of mass shootings, when we have surging levels of deaths of despair from the opioid crisis to suicide, it's hard to say that we're doing the greatest good for the greatest number. When we've got persistent male-female wage gaps, racial wealth gaps, steady numbers of black men getting killed for minor traffic violations, it's hard to say we're doing a really good job at upholding a promise to freedom and equality. When we look at what we do in this building, not just on our end here, but the north and the south ends of the building, do we do what the people ask us to do? Things that are overwhelmingly popular. Campaign finance reform, getting rid of gerrymandering, holding ourselves to the same legal and ethical standards that we ask all American citizens to be held to. We can't get those bills sent to the president's desk. Those things are rejected. We don't even get them out of this building. That's a question of whether we really are making sure that we have a government that is of, by, and for the people. Because I know that you all face the same questions I get when I go home. People say, why is it that people in this institution are failing to do things that are overwhelmingly popular? When we see those little polls that say Congress has a 20% approval rating, that should be a red light that we got to fix things. And of course, the refusal of substantially all of one political party, the party of Lincoln, to condemn an attack on the U.S. Capitol that sought to overturn a free and fair election is not a commitment to preserve and abide by the wisdom of the majority. Now, that can get depressing, and I'm not trying to depress anyone. It can be a cause for hopelessness, but not for us, right? I mean, we got into this job to fix things. Mr. Speaker, I know you got into this job to fix things, make things better, right? Seeing something that's broke is an opportunity to make it better. Maybe it's an opportunity for us to build something better, and maybe people will remember our names. But we got to get to work and move the baton forward to do that. And if we are going to do that, we have to first acknowledge some unpleasant, if self-evident, truths. First of all, we don't like to say it around here often, but we should. Our founders actually weren't perfect. They weren't Moses. They weren't Jesus. They were fallible people just like us. One of my favorite descriptions of the Constitutional Convention was Benjamin Franklin. And he was asked about the process, and he said, when you assemble a number of men to have the advantage of their joint wisdom, he should have said in women, but it's with the times. When you assemble them to get their joint wisdom, you inevitably assemble all of their prejudices, their passions, their errors of opinion, their local interests, and their selfish views. He was talking about the Constitutional Convention. Sounds an awful lot like he's talking about all the people we work with every day, right? We've all got our errors of opinion and our selfish views, and that's okay. Trust our founders that they were not perfect and they were just as flawed as we all are. The second thing we got to acknowledge is that our founders didn't actually think the Constitution was perfect. It's not this immutable stones passed on the mountain. This is Thomas Jefferson in September 1789, after the Constitution was ratified. He wrote to James Madison, every constitution, this is a little crazy, I warn you. Every constitution, every law should naturally expire at the end of 19 years. It might be that every form of government is so perfectly contrived that the will of the majority, remember, will of the majority, could always be obtained fairly, but this is true of no form. Now, I'm not suggesting that all our laws expire in 19 years, but these are the people who wrote the Constitution saying, I'm not sure this thing is really good for more than 19 years or so. That if we're going to make sure that we fulfill the will of the majority, we might have to prune it. Okay, that's fine. The third thing, and this is the one that I think is most important for us here today, is that our founders did not understand democracy nearly as well as we do. They were an amazing group of people. They did an amazing thing. But we have 233 years of wisdom that they did not have. We learned something with that time over the course. I mean, think about the fact that our founders designed a constitution with the idea that there would not be political parties. They called them factions, but they couldn't contemplate of a world where you could have a functioning democracy and political parties. Well, I think we've proved you can do that. They didn't have standing armies. They didn't have income taxes. They couldn't contemplate of a country where women had the right to vote. They couldn't contemplate a country where they didn't have the ability to hold slaves and not only not allow them to vote, but do a whole bunch of other things to suppress their freedom and their equality. They kicked that problem down the road. Again, these things sound familiar, right? We've been there. Now, they were wise enough to plan for those surprises. They made the Constitution amendable, but we know things they didn't know. We are governing in a different environment still under those tools. And if we acknowledge that they were no perfect than we are, if we acknowledge that we have a responsibility to move this baton forward, then I think we can be honest about what we can do and not be constrained by our own ambition. Because what's clear, the answer to that question, why is it that we can't do things that the majority of the American people want, is in large part because while our founders paid lip service to democracy, they said in that letter that Jefferson wrote to Madison that it is important that a government do the will of the majority. At core, they didn't really trust the will of the majority. They created the Electoral College because they didn't trust that people could be trusted with the vote, that direct elections of presidents was going to be a problem. You go and you read the stuff they read, and they said, some populist could just stir up the passions of some uninformed rube in the rural areas. I mean, these are almost direct quotes. They didn't trust that people in a fully democratic society could elect the president, so they created the Electoral College. They created the Senate expressly to frustrate the will of the majority. Now, I say they, this wasn't a universal view, but there was no way that we were going to have these United States to get all those colonies to agree unless there was some way to prevent the will of the majority from causing laws to go forward. And so we created the Senate. You could argue that we created the Senate to preserve slavery, and it did that for, a couple dozen years. But it massively overrepresented the low population states in order to make sure that we could actually get people to agree to join in these United States. That's what they did. Today, when it was founded, the biggest state had 10 times the population of the smallest state. Today, it's up to almost 100. So we have massively disenfranchised huge numbers of Americans' people because of a structure that was designed to disenfranchise large but not as big numbers of American people. We kick a bill out of here, you can get 50 votes in the Senate with people representing 17% of the United States population. When our voters ask us, why can't you get things done that are supported by the will of the majority, it's built into our system. And then finally, our founders created the Supreme Court with largely no checks and balances on the Supreme Court. Lifetime appointments, no ethics obligations. Goodness knows we've seen a fair amount of what's going on there right now. And remember, Marbury versus Madison, that significantly expanded the power of the court relative to the legislative branch, came after the Constitution was signed. This is a different structure than what they contemplated. And that effectively gave the Supreme Court not the ability to write laws, but darn close to it. Because you get one Supreme Court justice that flips the majority, and all of a sudden you can say that our work here, all the good work we put in, is unconstitutional and turned over on the whim of one vote. That's not majoritarian. I'd ask you to consider for a moment, what would our country look like just over the last couple dozen, maybe 3 decades, if the will of the majority had prevailed, if we actually lived in a country where we only did what the majority of Americans want to do. Well, first off, I'd like to introduce you to President Gore. Followed not too long after by President Hillary Clinton. We would have elected our first female president because that was the will of the majority, right? That would have had a dramatically different Supreme Court, whole numbers of decisions. How do we think about the Second Amendment in the wake of Heller would have been a heck of a lot different with different judges on that court. How we think about campaign finance in the wake of Citizens United would have been quite a bit different with different folks in the Supreme Court. The Dobbs decision, do we believe that women are truly equal in this society? That might have been a different decision if we had expressed the will of the people. And by the way, campaign finance reform, women's right to choose, wanting to not get shot, these are very popular things with the majority of the American people. And yet we can't deliver that because of what happened. I'm going to give you an exception that proves the rule. And this one is, we don't talk about enough here, but we as House members, this one should make us furious. Last year, this body passed on a bipartisan basis the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act. We made lynching a federal crime. Long, long overdue. Went to the Senate passed it, signed it into law, the President signed it. It is a bill now. It is now a federal crime to lynch in America. Good for the Senate. You know when that bill first passed this body? 1922. It took 100 years, a century, for the Senate to acknowledge what the House had acknowledged for 100 years, that lynching is bad. We got to fix this place, folks. So if we don't want to answer that question anymore, when people say, why can't you do what we want? We all know what they tell us, right? Why can't you do what we want? Well, it's because you're corrupt. It's because your donors won't let you do this. It's because you're just in it for your ego. And look, there's some of us who suffer from those problems. But if the institution needs fixing, we can fix it on our own. And if any of what I'm saying sounds partisan, I mean, look, I get it. I'm talking about women's right to choose. I'm talking about sensible gun control legislation. I'm talking about who would have won the president. All those things sound kind of partisan. That is only because we have, in this structure, we have gotten to a point where one party in America is representing the views of the majority of the American people, and the other party derives its power solely from those minoritarian institutions. In a healthy democracy, we should all be competing for that mythical center of the electorate. We shouldn't be sitting there and saying, I have a 20-year plan to stack the court with judges who will agree with me to overturn the will of the American people. We shouldn't be sitting there saying, well, I can control the Senate if I just find a couple Senate seats in a couple low population states with cheap TV markets. We all know it happens, right? We will be healthier, both of our parties, if we commit ourselves to the idea, as Jefferson said, that if we're not representing the will of the majority, because no form of government ever consistently does, let's fix it so that we do. Which brings me to the 3 bills we introduced today. The first bill is a constitutional amendment to add 12 national at-large senators. Doesn't do anything else to change the Senate. Doesn't do anything to frustrate Article 5, that you can't in any way diminish the relative power of the Senate. But imagine what would happen if 10% of the Senate had an interest in representing the will of the American people. We would then sit there in this house, the people's house, where we represent the will of the American people, with confidence that we had people fighting for us over there. It'd make it that much harder for them to filibuster a good bill that comes out of here, because why would you filibuster something that's supported by the majority of the American people? It would also, by adding 12 senators, add 12 more electors representing the popular vote that would reduce the number of scenarios where we could have the popular vote winner lose an election to the electoral vote winner. That's the first bill. The second one is to expand this House. And in the next census, 2030, to say, let's go out and look at the smallest state in the Union and say the size of that state is going to set the size of a congressional district. Because if we are the House of Representatives, we should make sure that all of us represent as close as we can the same number of people. The House hasn't grown since 1911. The population of the United States has grown 3.5 times since 1911. All of us in this room, on average, varies, your mileage may vary, represent 740,000 people. 1911, we represented 200,000 people. Imagine how much different our jobs would be if we had 200,000 constituents to represent, to go talk to understand, to make sure that we reflected their views. We'd be better. We'd be more representative. There's only 2 countries in the world in parliamentary democracies that represent more people than we do: India and Afghanistan. We're the crazy outlier, right? So let's expand the House, make us more representative. If we did that based on the last census, that would add something like 130 seats to this House. Again, would add further electors. It would make us more diverse. It would bring in a new group of people, would make us better, make us more representative. And then the third, because I know there's a lot of constitutional originalists in the room, is to restore the Supreme Court to their Article 3 responsibilities. If you haven't read it in a while, I'd encourage you to go read Article 3 of the Constitution that lays out the scope of the Supreme Court. It says that they are responsible for matters of admiralty law, maritime law, matters relating to ambassadors, disputes between the states, and such appellate jurisdiction as the Congress may see fit to provide from time to time. Well, if we have a court that is consistently not fulfilling the will of the American people, if we have a court that is consistently encroaching on our power here in this chamber, overturning our judgments is what we do, it is in our power to perhaps see fit from time to time to reduce their appellate jurisdiction. So what we've said is, let's reduce their appellate jurisdiction to the circuit courts, and let's depoliticize judge selection processes by, if the courts are going to say that a law that we passed is unconstitutional, we will select from a pool of circuit court judges, appellate court judges, at random, and it'll take at least 70% of them to overturn a bill that we pass out of here. It takes 2/3 for us to overturn a veto, right? Let's hold them to the same standard. Let's not make this political. Let's get enough people involved in the pool that you can't politicize this. Do it for the good of making this place work. Also would eliminate the shadow docket. Why do we allow ourselves to continue to live in a world where the Supreme Court can just decide to rule on something and not even explain it? How do you work as a lawyer if you don't know that? Let's get rid of the shadow docket. I'm not perfect. You aren't perfect, Mr. Speaker. None of us in this room are perfect. Our founders weren't perfect, but we are perfectible. And we have a job that affords us the opportunity and the responsibility to make our government a little bit better, a little bit more responsive, a little bit more democratic, to move the baton forward. And I would submit to you that that is just an amazing privilege. I'm grateful to have it. I'm grateful to serve with all of you. And I hope I can get the support of this body and my colleagues to redouble our commitments to make our government better, make sure that we honor Jefferson's promise to tune it and tweak it if it's not carrying out the majority will, and to pass that baton forward to whoever follows us up in a little better position than we got it ourselves. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.